Hello, welcome back to another edition of Economics with Mr. Co. And in this video, we will continue with the applications of elasticities of demand. And if you haven't watched the first part, predominantly on PED, price elasticity of demand, please click on the link below. So this is the second part of a 4-part series, and just a reminder to please also check the syllabus requirements for appropriate guidance. So this was the problem situation application question. And this video is still at part A, so explain how elasticities of demand are used to understand the impact of Part 1, a rise in cost of production, and Part 2, a rise in incomes on the sales volume of different car models. So we have addressed the first part of Part A in the previous video, and in this video we'll continue with Part 2 of this part question. All right, so here goes. Well, the demand factor is the rise in income, but demand could rise or fall depending on the sign of the income elasticity of demand, or YED, which measures the degree of responsiveness of the demand of a good to a change in consumer income, ceteris paribus. So just a quick recap on YED values. You can see the whole spectrum, negative to positive. If it's positive, that means that it's a normal good. And under normal goods, we have the subcategories. First, if YED is greater than 1, right, we call them luxury goods. And if YED is between 0 and 1, they are necessities. YED values that are negative would mean that the good is an inferior product. So we have inferior goods on the other end. And a more trivial case would be when YED equals to 0. That means that the demand for the good is unaffected by changes in Y. So unlike PED, where the coefficient is typically negative, so the sign is usually negative, we have to be mindful of the sign and the magnitude of YED, basically. Yeah. So it's not just the magnitude, but also the sign. Again, a recap. It's really fast, so if you're not sure, you have to consult, your own teachers or your notes or textbooks, right? Because I would like to focus on the application question. So numerically, for example, if there were 10% increase in consumer incomes, so that's the denominator, and a more than 10% increase in the demand for that particular good, then clearly YED is greater than 1, and that would be a very significant shift in the demand curve rightwards. Right, so we call the situation, more accurate description is that there is a more than proportionate increase in demand for luxury goods to the rise in incomes. Right, and if the denominator, again, percentage change in income, is positive 10%, but the numerator is lower than 10%, we have got a YED value that is between 0 and 1. And that means that the rightward shift in the demand curve is less significant. So there is a less than proportional increase in demand for necessities to the rise in consumer incomes. So you can compare the extent of the rightward shifts in both cases. Yeah, just a reminder to also draw the supply curve for completeness. I've left that out just because I want to show it for illustration. Yeah. Yeah, and again, a very quick recap on YED determinants. So the major determinant is the degree of necessity of the good. So in a developed economy, the demand for luxury goods expands rapidly as people's incomes rise, whereas the demand for the basic goods rises only a little. So for example, designer handbags and foreign holidays have very high income elasticity of demand. So there is a typo here. I meant to write 1. Here's a YED greater than 1, whereas items such as potatoes and undergarments have a low income elasticity of demand. It's between 0 and 1. Right. Another determinant is the quality of the good and service. So for example, as income rises, some products initially viewed as having an okay quality might be seen as, after the rise in income, having a lower quality. So for example, canned baked beans might see a fall in demand when incomes rise. So the YED is lower than 0, it's negative. Right, so to answer the question, coming back, right, for normal cars like Toyota, because the question is asking about different car models, so Toyota Mirai and Corolla, the YED is probably greater than 0, and demand would increase given an increase in consumer incomes. So the demand curve shifts to the right. Sales volume thus increases. For car models that are deemed as necessities, so it's income inelastic, that means YED is between 0 and 1, demand will increase less than proportionately to the rise in income, and therefore the sales volume would increase by a low extent compared to the case of luxury goods. So Toyota Corolla is probably a model that is deemed as a necessity in some countries, and as such, you would see that there is a less than proportionate rise in demand to the rise in income. Right. Now, we're still at the same brand, so Toyota, but a different model. So we've got here the Mirai. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this might be deemed as a luxury good just because it has better features, and also it's not really necessary to drive such such a high-end model, so to speak, of a car in everyday life. So the demand would rise more than proportionately to the rise in income. And as you can see in the diagram, there is a very significant rightward shift, right, in the demand curve as compared to what we saw for Toyota Corolla. So this means actually that the demand has risen more than proportionately to the rise in income. Yeah, so moving on to another case, possibly, the Mitsubishi Mirage is seen as an inferior car model in certain contexts. So that means that YED is negative, and there would actually be a fall in demand given a rise in income, right? So conversely, during a recession when incomes fall, there might be a rise in demand for the Mitsubishi Mirage. So, of course, it is country dependent as well. So the Mitsubishi Mirage may actually be a necessity in a lower income country, but an inferior good in a higher income country. So it is context dependent as well in terms of what, stage of development the country is at, for example. Yeah. So in conclusion, for the entire part A question, the rise in the cost of car manufacture would lead to a fall in supply and the equilibrium quantity would fall. Although the extent of the fall in sales volume would depend on the PEP value. So that was in the first video of this 4-part series. Right? And the rise in income can cause demand to either increase or decrease depending on the sign of the YED. But also within normal goods, it's further split into luxury goods and necessities. And there is a third elasticity of demand that is not so relevant for this question. And I'd just like to pose this question to my audience. Why is cross elasticity of demand less relevant here? All right. So we've completed part A, and definitely stay tuned for parts 3 and 4 of the series, where I would go over the second part B, of this essay question using real-world examples, discuss combined impact of both changes on the sales revenue and from different car models. All right. That's it for today. Goodbye.